Well, good morning, everybody. This is Shawn Ostheimer here for our Propel 2021 event. I am joined by Stephanie Sang, founder of Granted. Stephanie is known as the Granted Angel of Vancouver, but aims to be the Granted Angel of Canada. Welcome, Stephanie, to our event.
Thank you. Thanks, Shawn.
So Stephanie and I have been working together now almost 3 years. We've had a number of customers pretty much across Canada that have participated in various granting opportunities. And Granted has really been instrumental in helping us work with those customers to really access funds to move forward with various technology projects. So we thought it would be really great to have Stephanie speak to us today and share some of her insights and what's involved in accessing funds, and how can our customers be prepared to leverage the best that the Canadian government and various provinces have to offer. So welcome, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, Shawn.
So I know you've been very successful in helping companies raise funds, and I think you shared that over $40 million of funds have been accessed through the various granted services that you've provided. Share a little bit about what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a range of different types of grants available in Canada. They tend to be in 4 buckets: so hiring, training, market expansion, and research and development. So we work in the first 3 buckets. So other than the R&D side of things, which we tend not to work on as much, we work in the other 3 areas, which allows us to work with general businesses. You know, we're not niched in that we only work with technology firms or only work with manufacturers. So we do work quite industry agnostic across 27 different industries. I think the one thing that we find organizations are able to leverage, organizations who do leverage grants do them well when they have a little bit of more of a plan associated with what their organization is looking to do for the year. And then it's a matter of slipping in the grants when they become available, and knowing and planning for them so that you are able to access them at the right time. And so there are companies that work with us and they've gotten 6 figures every year since they started working with us. And other organizations, depending on whether or not they're engaging in grantable activities, so that hiring, training, market expansion side of things, they might be, getting a couple of new hires and it's still in the high or mid kind of 5 figures there. So the goal is to plan well and to be able to leverage the grants when you really need them, but also know that grants aren't, it's not like they're there forever, right? So the timing, and I think you and I had discussed this in a previous conversation, but the timing of grants is really important.
So tell me, what kind of companies should apply to grants? And are there companies that should just say, you know what, grants are charity and we shouldn't be doing that? Like, what does that look like, and how do you help navigate that?
Sure. I mean, I think that Canada is amazing in the way that they issue different programs. So it is all about equity, inclusion. There definitely are more programs for organizations that are considered small, medium-sized enterprises. So specifically under 500 employees. I think it would be a challenge if, an organization like TELUS or Rogers came in and said, hey, we just got, $14 million of grant funding from the Canadian government, and probably small, medium-sized businesses would kind of turn their head and go like, why do you need this funding? So on the flip side, though, they might be doing some really innovative stuff, and there are, beyond just grants, there's also tax credits that organizations should look at, especially in the manufacturing space or technology development space, where they're developing something that is quite innovative. And so there's tax credits, there's grants. To answer your question about who should be applying, in my perspective, everybody should be applying. Everyone who has a need where they're looking to upskill their team members, maybe they're looking to grow their team, they're maybe looking at international expansion, and also the huge bucket of research and development, so that you can leverage non-dilutive funding to grow those initiatives. And so in terms of those who feel like it might be charity, That's great. That means that their company is doing well. And there are some companies, especially during COVID, they're like, you know what, we really want to leave the money to those who really need it. And I applaud that. I think it is a comfort level in terms of how you feel these grants are being offered. And often they are offered when something that you're doing is a little bit riskier. Right. So you might be going into a new market, South Africa, and you've never been in there before. And yes, you have the marketing budget for it, but maybe an export grant, for instance, could expand the activities that you're doing in that particular market. And so there is, some risk mitigation when you leverage government funding to offset certain things. And so that's something that I find even the companies that do very well, high profitability, they're still looking at grants to stretch their runway as much as they can as well.
So we've obviously had a number of customers and clients who have worked together to help them raise money. And I know we've talked a little bit about there's additional services beyond just funding a technology digital transformation project. I want to ask a little bit about that, but let's talk about some of those customers, both customers who have used funding to support upgrade projects, but also customers who have used funding really to just support a new implementation.
Yeah.
How do they get ready for that? And how do they plan their project with some certainty of that funding, knowing that it's available perhaps quarterly or on some kind of a frequency that makes it a little bit less certain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So timely that you're asking this question as well, because the federal budget just was launched yesterday. And so we're seeing a little bit of how the government is really looking at supporting things like purchasing equipment or implementing different pieces of new software and things like that. So we're seeing that as well. I want to maybe clarify a couple of things in that traditionally the government has been less supportive of just pure out buying equipment for organizations or paying for a large chunk of their equipment or for their software, for instance. So Sage or, whatever system that they're looking to implement. Organizations are expected that they should be paying for it because it is considered an operational cost. There are some exceptions to the rule, and I'll just mention organizations that, like, say, for example, are in food processing. They tend to get a different bucket of funding that might have to do with things like lean manufacturing or production capability and capacity, increasing that. And so every so often there's some of these offshoot grants that will support a component of bringing a consultant in to help you implement certain technologies. I think, though, where we found the greatest success, Shawn, with your clients is with helping organizations pay for the training of their staff members who are utilizing this new technology. And you know better than I do that the technology can only be used well if your staff members know how to use it. And you talk to numerous companies these days where they go, oh yeah, I implemented a CRM. It's useless. And it's like, well, and that's for customer relation management. And it's like, well, do you have all your data in there? Are you running reports from there? Like, is the information that you're actually putting in there valuable, or are you just doing it on when it's convenient to you? And so I think that is really important. These grants are really gearing towards upskilling Canadians to help them with accessing, grant funding so that they can better learn a technology that could increase their employment opportunities, or the benefits come back to the company in terms of everybody knowing how to use something. So that's the first part of the question. The second part has to do with timing. I would say there's two buckets of organizations that we tend to work with. Ones who decide they do want to be implementing, or they're going to be training their staff up regardless of whether or not there is this grant. In that case, I would say those ones, so long as you haven't paid for the training yet and you haven't really scheduled anything in. So a payment is considered, especially in different provinces, that there's different rules, and we'll go through that in a minute. But if you paid for something, put a deposit down, the idea that comes to the government is, well, you were going to pay for it anyway. And so why should, the Canadian government go and offset your costs? Because it seems like it's something you're going to pay for anyway. So that is something in particular with Alberta and Ontario that they're very picky about that, especially when you're applying and you go, oh yeah, I've already set this up, I already set dates, or you've already started the courses. Like, that's another time, even if you haven't paid yet, but you've already gone ahead and started your training, that's when it's a no-no. On the flip side of things, though, there are provinces like BC where you can apply even if you have financially committed. But what does that mean? It means that, well, you've already paid. So unless, your trainer is going to refund the dollars to you if you don't get the grant, the idea is that you're now bearing that risk. So as an organization, you apply for this grant, you already paid maybe a deposit to the trainer for the courses that you're taking, and the grant comes through, great. Then, you can still proceed. But if it doesn't come through, now you're on the hook for that 30% that you put down. And so it really does depend on the cash flow situation of the organization, which province they're in. If you're applying in BC, I would say apply at least 4 months in advance of when you are going to be starting the course. If you're applying in Alberta or in Ontario, you're probably looking at a month, maybe 6 weeks before you start the course, that you want to make sure that you put an application in, just to allow for enough time for adjudication.
We have clients across Canada. So you mentioned BC, Alberta, and Ontario. So what are the other nuances that people should be aware of between the various provinces and the type of grants and the money that's available to companies?
Yeah. So I will tell you, Shawn, that these programs change all the time. So I'm going to timestamp and date stamp it to today, and say that each province has its own set of rules. And the biggest challenge that organizations have is understanding, how is something done here so different from how it's done in other provinces. Generally speaking, BC has some unique benefits in that you can apply for your business owners and your leadership team to be a part of the training. And that is important, right? Because you want to make sure that that training comes from the top. Alberta has recently introduced some relaxation in that area. It used to be, no, you couldn't. But now they're saying if you're a company size that's smaller, then you might be able to get your management and leadership and ownership team in there. And Ontario it's a straight up no. If you are training staff members, they cannot be relatives of the owner. They cannot be the owners themselves or shareholders. So those are, that's one example of the differences. We just spoke of the timing of when these applications go through, but let's now talk dollar amounts. BC subsidizes 80% for technology training, which I believe that's, what Answer Co's applications will go in as. But if it is more leadership driven and maybe less about the technology, then we're looking at 60%. There's also special funding that will take you up to 100% of training costs if your organization was heavily impacted by COVID. And so there's different streams that are coming about across different provinces. And again, these budgets are just launching this month federally, and today BC's budget is going to launch as well. And so you will find that there will be additional announcements associated with, how these provinces are going to be running their programs this year. Alberta, though, is a 2/3 cost. And let me mention to you, consistently across the board, they're kind of a $10,000 upper limit based on the grant amount that you can secure per person per fiscal year. And so we aren't looking at, everybody gets $30 or everybody gets 50. It is, if you are looking at a training course that costs $100,000 and maybe 10 people are getting trained up on it, you would possibly max out on something like that if you're getting 100% of it covered. So Alberta is 2/3 of the cost. And then Ontario has a couple of different buckets. If you're a smaller business, they may pay for some of the wages associated with someone taking the course, and they kind of offset. They consider that your contribution as an employer to say that, okay, we'll give you, a little bit more money. We'll give you 50% of the 1/3 that you should be paying, assuming that you're paying this person to take the training, which is, usually that's what's legal across the board. Is if it's a mandatory training, you do have to be paying your staff for the time. But Ontario does have a small difference in that they will pay for some extra training costs. So usually you can take up to 5/6 of the actual total cost of the training, which is great. If you're getting 83% of your training costs covered, that's probably as high as you could get for the type of training that you provide.
It's interesting that you mentioned this idea of having the date and timestamp the information that you're sharing. Because I remember when we first started talking 3 years ago and thinking, I can just go up to a government website, I can read about the program. This should be easy peasy. Yeah. And working with you and your team over the last 3 years, I've recognized it's not easy peasy. There's nuances and details. So for the benefit of the clients that we have involved and listening in today, how do they tap into your services and how can they take advantage of all of this knowledge and insight that you have on these programs so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel and can truly benefit from this great Canada that we have and the money that's available to businesses to be more successful?
Right. Well, that's why I started my business 10 years ago, is that I felt there was a huge gap between the companies that knew of these grants and just kept going after them year after year versus ones who were like, there's no grant funding for businesses. It's only for nonprofits and for charities. So what we've been doing over the last 10 years is really hoping to close that gap. We have a Get Started page on our website where you can fill out a free grant assessment. Essentially, it's a grant calculator. It's totally free. And that will give you an idea of the grant amounts that you could probably qualify for based on a few answers that you're going to put in terms of what your organization is going to be doing moving forth this year. You know, if you're hiring 3 people in the next 3 months, or if you're investing in training, say, for example, with AnswerCo, maybe you are expanding into new markets, it will spit out a number for you. Now, that number, like I said, will likely change. And in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge influx of government spending. Unfortunately, it's due to COVID, but it almost takes a pandemic to, you know, shake some business owners and CEOs in the world to say like, hey, we should be looking at government funding. I was like, thank God the Prime Minister is out there saying this, right? Having said that, what is important is once you fill out the form and you will be offered an opportunity to have a discovery call with our team, tell you a little bit about how we work. We've also changed the way that we've done things, Shawn, in the last 3 years. And maybe this is a good time for me to share that as well. In the past, we've been a little bit more transactional. So, let's say AnswerCo is a client of ours. You would say, hey, Steph, I'm going to be hiring a person. We would look at the grants that are available and we kind of move forward with the application. Now what we're doing is we're being very strategic. So we're doing an annual strategic call. We're doing 3 quarterly check-ins because, as you know, things change usually on a quarterly basis. But in the case of pandemic, it's immediate, like a 1 day. That happens as well. And then we're supporting our clients through our proprietary portal, which is called Get Granted. And you'll see information on our website about it. And it actually notifies our clients when grants match their profile so that when a program comes up, which speaks to your question on, how do people get notified? It actually notifies them that, hey, there's this grant for you, Shawn, you should check it out. And instead of having to read through 40, 50-page application guides, we summarize the information and we can send you a summary of it in bullet points. That's how business owners want to read the information. And then all you do is you click on I'm interested, and then your account manager will connect with you and go through, vetting and ensuring that this is the best program for what you're looking for and to explain any details in terms of next steps. So we've been really successful, utilizing this new system, which has garnered 260% more in grant funding for companies than when we weren't doing it this way. So it's almost like, oh, I wish we'd been doing this like from the start. But it almost does take, for us to have the right pieces in place, including that portal that we built out. So that's how we tend to work with companies. There are larger organizations, or maybe I'll go micro organizations. They're kind of on the side of, we tend to work with companies that are 10 employees, $500,000, been established for a couple of years, all the way up to about 250 employees. Like that's kind of our niche. So when you're outside of that, it's a bell curve. So we work with both sides, but there's another option, which is called Get Granted. I mentioned earlier, and it is full access to the portal, but it is a DIY. So you don't get the service that you get with us, where we help you identify the right grant. We help you through the process of the application. And we are also involved in the reconciliation reimbursement claim stage. So the grant's not just done when you get an approval. It's all the way through to ensuring that you get the money in the bank. And so we manage that with our boutique clients. And then those who do a DIY, it's more information to share with them, to give them those notifications so that they never miss out on a grant that matches their profile. So we've kind of done a little bit of a tech play in the last couple of years. And so always nice to share new news with you, Shawn, about our company in that way.
Very cool. Yeah, at the end of our presentation, we'll include a page that provides all the contact information and the link to the website so that clients can can go visit and maybe sign up for your portal and start to see some of that stuff. So it's been, really great talking to you, Steph. I always enjoy our conversations, and I know our clients are going to learn so much. So kind of as we think about wrapping, is there any kind of final tidbits of information that you'd like to share that the nature of the type of clients that we have are going to be most benefiting from?
Yeah, I mean, I would say involving your team to understand what it is that's their needs. And often it's a budget issue, right? It's, do we have the money, especially post-pandemic? Everyone's kind of hoarding cash a little bit. So what are the creative ways that we can leverage programs in order to ensure that things move forth faster instead of having to wait another year of budget before we can put something forth? Another thing that I would say is keeping an eye out for grants throughout the year is really important. I mean, grants are free for organizations to apply for. You absolutely do not have to be paying consultants to do it. But the service that we provide goes, to the fact that we have such a strong success rate, and we know exactly what goes into an application, how it needs to be put in, when it needs to be put in. We consider factors like how many people are getting training, and does that work for the functionality of the business and the operations? And so we provide that type of insight on a consultancy basis. So it's just really important that all organizations understand grants are available to them and that they do leverage them. I mean, whether you're hiring a student and you get a $5,000 grant for them, or you're going after a market expansion grant for $75,000, these are all programs that are available to small businesses in Canada. So if you're not getting it, your competitor is. So we look forward to getting everybody granted.
Well, appreciate your time today, and this has been hugely insightful. So yeah, everybody, hope you've enjoyed it. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.